I was 8 months pregnant when my mother-in-law tapped her glass, smiling like she was about to give a toast. Instead, she announced she had brought 47 reasons her son should divorce me. The guests laughed until I read reason 23 out loud. The room went dead silent. She turned ghost white because she had just documented her own crime, and my husband's smile vanished the second he realized she had stolen $9,800 from us. My name is Kylie Hughes. I am 32 years old, and at the time this story begins, I was 8 months pregnant. I felt like a planet in orbit, swollen ankles and aching back, wrapped in a dress that cost more than my first car, sitting on a velvet chair that looked like a throne but felt like a trap. The room was filled with pastel balloons and the scent of expensive lilies. It was supposed to be a celebration of new life. It was supposed to be my baby shower. But if you looked closely at the edges of the room, past the manicured floral arrangements and the caterers moving like ghosts, you would realize this wasn't a party. It was a stage. And I was the prop my mother-in-law was using to perform her favorite role, the long-suffering matriarch dealing with a disappointing daughter-in-law. The chatter in the room was a dull roar, the sound of 50 people politely ignoring the tension that had been thickening the air for 3 hours. Then, the tapping started. Clink, clink, clink. Marjorie stood up. My mother-in-law. She looked impeccable. Of course. She was wearing a cream-colored suit that cost $3,000. Her hair sprayed into a helmet of blonde perfection that defied the humidity of a North Carolina afternoon. She held a champagne flute in one hand and a thick, heavy white envelope in the other. She smiled, and the room went quiet. It was that special kind of quiet reserved for people who hold the purse strings of an entire extended family. "If I could have everyone's attention," Marjorie said, her voice dripping with that slow, sugary southern charm that rots your teeth before you realize you have been poisoned. "I have a little something special for Kylie, a gift, something I have been working on for quite some time." She looked at me. Her eyes didn't smile. Her mouth did, stretching wide to show perfect veneers. But her eyes were dead. They were flat and cold, like a shark circling a swimmer who has drifted too far from the shore. "I know we have all had our adjustments," she continued, gesturing vaguely with the envelope. "But I wanted to be honest today. I believe in honesty above all else. So, instead of a card or another onesie, I brought this." She held the envelope up higher, letting the light catch the expensive linen paper. "I brought 47 reasons my son should divorce you." The silence that followed wasn't total. It was worse. It was followed by a ripple of laughter. A few cousins, an aunt from out of town, even some of my own friends, they chuckled. They thought it was Marjorie being Marjorie, the eccentric mother-in-law doing a roast, playing up the trope of the monster-in-law for comedic effect. It was a joke. It had to be a joke. I looked at my husband, Nate. Nate was standing by the dessert table, holding a plate of macarons. He looked at his mother, then he looked at the crowd laughing, and then he did the one thing that broke my heart more than anything else that day. He laughed too. It was a nervous laugh, a reflex. It was the laugh of a man who has spent 30 years keeping the peace, smoothing over the cracks, pretending the water isn't rising when he is already drowning. He laughed because he wanted the tension to dissipate. He laughed because he was a coward. That laugh hit me like a physical blow. It froze the blood in my veins. If he had looked shocked, if he had looked angry, if he had stepped forward to stop her, maybe things would have gone differently. But he laughed. He sanctioned it. I didn't laugh. I stared at Marjorie. I pushed myself up from that velvet chair, my knees popping, the weight of the pregnancy pressing down on my bladder. I waddled. There is no dignity in the third trimester, across the Persian rug. The laughter in the room began to die down, flickering out like candles in a draft. As people realized I wasn't smiling, I reached out my hand. "Let me see it, Marjorie." She hesitated for a fraction of a second, her grip tightening on the envelope. She expected me to cry. She expected me to run out of the room in tears, making a scene, proving her point that I was hormonal and unstable. She didn't expect me to walk toward the fire. "Oh, honey, you don't want to read it now," she said, her voice dropping to a faux whisper that was meant to be heard by the back row. "It is just some constructive criticism." "Give it to me." I snatched it from her hand. The envelope wasn't sealed. I pulled out the stack of papers. It was typed, single-spaced, numbered. It looked like a legal brief. I scanned the first page. Reason number 1. She is too independent and refuses to ask for guidance. Reason number 2. Her background does not align with our family standards. Petty, vicious, but expected. I flipped the page. The room was dead silent now. You could hear the air conditioning humming. You could hear the ice melting in the untouched drinks. Then I saw it. Reason number 23. I stopped. My breath caught in my throat. I looked up at Marjorie. She was watching me with a smug expression, waiting for me to crumble. She had no idea what she had included in this list. She was so arrogant, so convinced of her own untouchability, that she hadn't even proofread her own malice. "You wrote this?" I asked, my voice calm, terrifyingly calm. "I wrote every word, dear," she said, tilting her head. "Then you won't mind if I share one?" I didn't wait for her permission. I raised my voice, projecting to the room, to Nate, to the cousins, to the neighbors, to Summer Lane, who was standing in the corner looking far too pleased with herself. I read reason number 23 out loud. The words hung in the air. For a second, nobody moved. It took a moment for the meaning to sink in. And then, I saw it happen. I saw the exact moment Marjorie realized what she had done. The color didn't just drain from her face, it vanished. She went from a healthy, tanned complexion to the color of wet chalk. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Her eyes went wide, darting from me to Nate to the guests. She froze. Absolute paralysis. I am a senior risk analyst for Cedar and Rowe Risk Analytics. My entire job, my entire career, is built on one simple principle. Never enter a negotiation, a merger, or a war without the data to win it. Marjorie thought she was ambushing a helpless pregnant woman. She didn't realize she was picking a fight with someone who analyzes worst-case scenarios for a living. I don't gamble, I calculate. And the night she started this war, she made a miscalculation that was going to cost her everything. Let's rewind to Tuesday night, 9:52 p.m. It was Tuesday night, exactly 9:52 p.m. I remember the time with absolute clarity because I was staring at the glowing green digits on the cable box, trying to focus on anything other than the fact that my ankles had swelled to the size of grapefruits. Being 8 months pregnant does not feel like the glowy, ethereal miracle you see on Instagram. It feels like you are carrying a bowling ball in a hammock made of stretched skin. I was wedged into the corner of our gray sectional sofa, surrounded by a fortress of pillows, trying to find a position that didn't make my lower back scream. My husband, Nate, was standing in the kitchen doorway. He was pacing, phone pressed to his ear, his posture stiffening in that specific way it always did when his mother was on the line. It was Pavlovian. Marjorie called, and Nate straightened his spine like a private reporting to a general. He had put her on speakerphone, presumably so he could chop vegetables while he listened, but he had stopped chopping 5 minutes ago. Now, he just stood there, holding a bell pepper like a weapon he didn't know how to use. While Marjorie's voice filled our living room, she did not sound like a grandmother planning a party. She sounded like a CEO executing a hostile takeover. "I have finalized the venue contract. Nathan?" Marjorie's voice was crisp, cutting through the humidity of the evening. "We are doing it at the Wellington Ridge Clubhouse. I pulled a few strings with the board. It is the only space with adequate lighting for the photographer I hired." I shifted on the couch, wincing as a rib kicked me from the inside. "Nate," I whispered, waving a hand to get his attention. "Tell her we talked about doing it in the backyard. Just something simple." Nate looked at me, panic flaring in his eyes. He hated being the messenger. "Mom," he started, his voice cracking slightly. "Kylie and I were actually thinking, I have already put down the deposit. Nathan. Marjorie cut him off. She didn't yell. She never yelled. She just spoke over you with the relentless momentum of a glacier. And do not worry about the catering. I have ordered the platinum package, salmon canapes, mini beef Wellingtons, and a champagne tower. No cheap punch bowls. I felt a surge of irritation that momentarily overrode my exhaustion. I leaned forward, groaning as I hauled myself upright. Marjorie? I said, raising my voice so the speakerphone would pick it up. Hi, it's Kylie. That sounds lovely, but I really wanted a specific theme. I was looking at this storybook idea. Very low-key. Maybe just... Oh, Kylie, she interrupted. Her tone shifted instantly. It went from boardroom command to a sickeningly sweet, condescending coo. It was the voice you would use to talk to a slow toddler or a dog that had just peed on the rug. Sweetheart, you really need to stop worrying your pretty little head about these details. Stress is terrible for the baby. Besides, storybook is a little juvenile, don't you think? We want this to be elegant. We are presenting the baby to society, not hosting a kindergarten reading circle. I bristled. It's a baby shower. Marjorie, it's supposed to be for a baby. It is an event for the family, she corrected, her voice hardening just a fraction. And speaking of family, I have finalized the guest list. I added about 20 names. People you haven't met, Kylie, but important connections for Nathan's career, and of course, I invited the Lanes. The air left the room. Nate froze, the bell pepper slipping from his hand and hitting the counter with a dull thud. The Lanes? Nate asked, his voice tight. Mom, you mean... Summer and her parents are back in town. Marjorie breezed past his discomfort as if it didn't exist. It would be incredibly rude to exclude them after all the history our families share. Summer was so excited when I told her. She said she couldn't wait to see how you're doing. My stomach turned. Summer Lane, Nate's ex-girlfriend. The woman Marjorie had spent 5 years trying to get Nate to marry before he met me. The woman who looked like she was manufactured in a factory that built perfect Southern belles. Marjorie inviting her to my baby shower wasn't a gesture of politeness. It was a power move. It was a reminder that I was the replacement, the interloper, the one who didn't fit the mold. Marjorie, I said, my voice shaking with a mix of hormones and rage. I am not comfortable with Nate's ex-girlfriend being at my baby shower. That is weird. It is inappropriate. There was a pause on the line. A long, heavy silence. When Marjorie spoke again, her voice was dripping with faux pity. Oh, Kylie, I keep forgetting. Forgetting what? I snapped. That you just do not know how these things work. She sighed. It is not your fault, dear. I know you grew up in that foster situation, and your adoptive parents were lovely people, I am sure, but they obviously didn't have the background to teach you proper etiquette. In our world, we do not exclude old friends just because of petty insecurities. We are gracious. We are secure. If you had a biological mother to guide you through these milestones, perhaps you would understand the nuance of social obligations. The insult landed with the precision of a surgical strike. She hadn't just called me insecure. She had weaponized my adoption, my childhood, and my lack of biological family in 3 sentences. She had effectively said I was too trashy to understand why my husband's ex-girlfriend should watch me open diaper boxes. Nate looked at me, his face pale. He knew she had crossed a line. He knew he should say something. I watched him, waiting for him to tell her to shut up, waiting for him to hang up the phone. Mom, Nate said, his voice weak. Maybe we should discuss the guest list later. That was it. That was his defense. Nonsense, Marjorie said briskly. Invites go out tomorrow. Now, tell Kylie to go to bed. She sounds cranky. She needs to rest. You will need all your strength. Dear. Why will I need my strength? Marjorie? I asked, staring at the phone. Because hosting is exhausting work, she said, but the tone wasn't helpful. It was ominous. It sounded like a threat. Good night, Nathan. Kiss the belly for me." The line went dead. Nate stared at the phone screen for a second before setting it down. He didn't look at me. He picked up the bell pepper again, turning it over in his hands as if looking for answers in the vegetable. "She means well. Kai," he mumbled. The standard Mercer family mantra, the phrase that was used to excuse everything from passive-aggressive comments to emotional arson. "She insulted my parents, Nate," I said, my voice deadly quiet. "She invited your ex-girlfriend, and you stood there and debated the guest list." "She's just excited," Nate said, finally turning to look at me. He looked tired. He looked like a man who just wanted the path of least resistance, even if that path ran directly over his wife. "It's just one afternoon. Summer won't cause drama. Mom just wants everything perfect. Can we please not fight about this? My head is pounding." I looked at him. I looked at the man I had married, the father of the child kicking my ribs, and I realized something that chilled me more than the air conditioning. He wasn't on my team. He was a hostage who had fallen in love with his captor. "I am not fighting, Nate," I said. "I am observing." I struggled up from the couch. Ignoring his offer of a hand, I walked to the bedroom, my mind racing. That wasn't a conversation about a party. That was a declaration of ownership. Marjorie wasn't throwing a baby shower. She was organizing a tribunal. She was setting the stage, picking the audience, and writing the script. And if she was inviting Summer Lane, she was planning a show. I went into the bedroom and grabbed my notebook from the nightstand. I sat on the edge of the bed and wrote down the date and time. Tuesday, 9:52 p.m. Incident. Forced venue change. Invitation of hostile guest, Summer Lane. Derogatory comments regarding adoption and family background. I am a risk analyst. When I see a pattern of escalating behavior, I don't ignore it. I document it. Marjorie thought she was just planning a party where she could make me feel small. She didn't know that she had just given me the first entry in the case file that would eventually destroy her. "Get plenty of rest," she had said. "You'll need it." She was right. I would need it, but not for the party. I would need it for the war she had just started. I closed the notebook, turned off the lamp, and lay in the dark, listening to Nate washing dishes in the kitchen, trying to wash away the guilt of his own silence. He thought the conversation was over. I knew it was just the opening statement. Friday night dinner at the Caldwell estate was not a meal. It was a performance review. We arrived at 6:30 on the dot. Marjorie's house was a sprawling brick colonial that looked like it belonged on the front of a brochure for the American dream. The kind of place where the hedges were trimmed with nail scissors and the air always smelled faintly of lemon pledge and judgment. As we walked up the driveway, I smoothed my hands over my dress. I had made a specific choice that night. Marjorie had been dropping hints for weeks that I should wear something soft, something maternal, which in her language meant pastel tints, that would hide my body and make me look like a compliant Easter egg. I went the opposite direction. I was wearing a deep burgundy knit dress I had bought myself. It was form-fitting. It hugged the bump. It was the color of a good Cabernet, rich and dark and commanding. It made me feel like a woman, not just an incubator. It made me feel like Kylie Hughes, risk analyst, the woman who could stare down a boardroom of nervous investors. I needed that armor because I knew what was waiting inside. The moment we stepped through the double oak doors, the noise hit me. The house was full. Aunts, uncles, cousins, I only saw once a year. Marjorie had assembled the full court. They were all standing in the foyer, holding crystal tumblers of scotch and white wine, laughing that specific, hollow laugh that wealthy families use to fill the silence where genuine affection should be. When Marjorie saw me, her smile didn't falter, but her eyes did a quick, vertical scan, top to bottom. She cataloged the dress, the swollen ankles, the way my hair was pulled back. She cataloged it all and filed it away for ammunition. "There they are," she announced. Her voice projecting like a stage actor, she glided over, kissing the air next to my cheek so she wouldn't smudge her makeup. "And look at you, Kylie. You look so ripe." It was a word choice that made my skin crawl. We moved into the dining room. The table was set for 20. Fine china, heavy silver, linen napkins folded into swans. I was seated in the middle, directly across from Marjorie. It wasn't an accident. She wanted a clear line of sight. Nate sat next to me, his knee bouncing nervously under the table. He knew the mood. He knew the frequency his mother was vibrating on. Even if no one else could hear it, dinner was a polite affair at first. The conversation floated over the surface of things, golf scores, the humidity, the upcoming elections, but I could feel the pressure building. Marjorie was waiting for a lull. She was a sniper waiting for the wind to die down before taking the shot. It happened between the salad and the main course. "You know," Marjorie said, her voice cutting through the clinking of silverware. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at Aunt Sylvia, but speaking loud enough for the neighbors to hear. "I was just reading an article in Vogue about maternity fashion. It said that darker colors are so tricky in the third trimester. They tend to create a silhouette that is just so heavy." The table went quiet. Forks paused halfway to mouths. She turned her gaze to me, her expression the picture of helpful concern. "I am just saying, dear, that burgundy is lovely on a hanger, but sitting down, it really emphasizes the sheer mass of the situation. You look like you're about to burst out of the seams." I gripped my fork. "I like this dress. Marjorie, I think it shows off the pregnancy." "Of course you like it, honey," she smiled. A tight, pitying thing. "You have always had such unique taste. But you know, there is a reason we have traditions, if your biological mother were still alive. God rest her soul. I am certain she would have pulled you aside before you left the house. She would have taught you that a woman in your condition should present herself with a little more modesty, a little more grace." The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. It was a double tap. First, she called me fat. Then, she invoked my dead biological mother, a woman I never knew, a woman who died giving birth to me, to tell me I had no class. I looked at Nate. This was the moment. This was the point in the movie where the husband slams his hand on the table and says, "Enough." This was where he defends his wife, the mother of his child, against the woman who is actively trying to humiliate her. Nate opened his mouth. I saw the muscles in his jaw work. I saw the flash of anger in his eyes. He started to say, "Mom, that is not—" Marjorie just looked at him. She didn't speak. She just raised one perfectly arched eyebrow, a look that said, "Are you sure you want to do this, Nathan? Are you sure you want to make a scene and ruin my dinner?" Nate's mouth closed. He looked down at his plate. He picked up his wine glass and took a long drink. "The roast beef looks excellent." "Mom," he said softly. My heart didn't break. It hardened. It calcified. That silence was worse than the insult. Marjorie was the scorpion, acting according to her nature. But Nate? Nate was the one holding the jar, and he just refused to put the lid on. I didn't say another word. I cut my meat. I chewed. I swallowed. I focused on the data. Fact. My husband is compromised. Fact. My mother-in-law is escalating. Fact. I am alone in this room, or so I thought. Aunt Sylvia, Marjorie's younger sister, was watching me from the end of the table. Sylvia was the black sheep because she had divorced 3 rich husbands and kept all the money. She caught my eye. She didn't smile. She just held my gaze for 3 seconds, intense and unblinking. It was a look that said, "Do not let them see you bleed." She gave a nearly imperceptible nod, then went back to her wine. But the real blow was yet to come. As the plates were being cleared, Nate's phone lit up on the table between us. He had left it face up. Rookie mistake. The screen brightened with a text message. I wasn't trying to look, but the contrast against the dark tablecloth was impossible to miss. Sender. Summer Lane. Message. Just picked up the dress for Sunday. Can't wait to celebrate with you guys. X. Oh, the winky face. The XO. The casual intimacy of texting a married man at 8 p.m. on a Friday night about his wife's baby shower. My stomach dropped. It wasn't just that she was coming, it was that she was texting him about it, and the tone suggested this was part of an ongoing conversation. Celebrate with you guys, as if she were part of the unit, as if I were just the vessel, and she and Nate and Marjorie were the real family. I looked at Nate. He saw the notification. He flipped the phone over instantly, his hand moving with a guilty speed that told me everything I needed to know. He didn't look at me. He looked at Marjorie, and for a split second, they shared a look, a quick, conspiratorial glance. I felt like I was going to be sick, not morning sickness, soul sickness. I excused myself to go to the restroom. I needed to breathe. I needed to splash cold water on my face before I screamed and flipped the table. I walked down the hallway, the heavy carpet swallowing my footsteps. I went into the guest powder room, locked the door, and stared at myself in the mirror. The burgundy dress looked beautiful. Marjorie was a liar. But my eyes looked haunted. I washed my hands, drying them on a towel that was probably monogrammed with silk thread. When I unlocked the door and stepped back into the hallway, a hand shot out from the shadows of the kitchen alcove and grabbed my wrist. I gasped, pulling back, ready to defend myself. It was Bryn, Nate's younger sister. Bryn was 26, worked at a credit union, and usually spent family dinners trying to blend into the wallpaper. She looked terrified. Her eyes were wide, and she was checking over her shoulder to make sure Marjorie wasn't following me. "Bryn?" I whispered. "What are you doing?" She pulled me deeper into the alcove, away from the dining room archway. Her grip on my arm was tight, her fingers trembling. "I can't talk here," she hissed, her voice barely audible. "She has ears everywhere. The housekeeper tells her everything." "Bryn, you're scaring me. What is going on?" "You need to meet me tomorrow," she said, her words rushing out in a panic. "Coffee shop on 4th, the one with the bad parking, 10 a.m. Do not bring Nate." "Why? Is this about the baby shower?" Bryn looked at me, and I saw genuine fear in her face, not social anxiety, real, tangible fear. "It is not about the shower, Kylie. It is about the money." "What money?" "Just meet me," she pleaded. "If Mom knows I am talking to you, she will kill me, but I can't. I can't watch her do this to you. I looked at the logs today. Kylie." "I saw the transfer." "What transfer?" "Tomorrow," she said, backing away as footsteps clicked on the hardwood floor in the distance. 10 a.m. Come alone." She turned and vanished into the kitchen just as Nate rounded the corner. "Kai?" he asked, looking relieved to see me. "You okay? You were gone a while." I looked at my husband. I looked at the phone in his pocket that held texts from his ex-girlfriend. I looked at the dining room where his mother was holding court, tearing me apart piece by piece, and I thought about Bryn's trembling hands. "I'm fine, Nate," I lied. It was the first of many lies I would tell him in the next 48 hours. "Just the baby kicking." I took his arm and walked back into the lion's den. But I wasn't just a pregnant woman in a tight dress anymore. I was an analyst who had just been tipped off that there was a glitch in the system, and tomorrow morning, I was going to find the source code. The coffee shop on 4th Street was the kind of place where the acoustics were terrible, which made it perfect for a conversation you did not want anyone to overhear. The espresso machine screamed every 30 seconds, and the indie folk music was blaring just loud enough to drown out a whisper. I walked in at 10 o'clock exactly. Bryn was already there. She was sitting at a small wobbly table in the back corner, her back to the wall, eyes darting toward the door every time the bell chimed. She had a latte in front of her that looked stone cold. The foam had collapsed into a sad beige film. She looked less like a woman meeting her sister-in-law and more like an informant meeting a handler in a spy novel. I sat down across from her. I didn't order anything. My stomach was doing flip-flops that had nothing to do with the baby and everything to do with the look of absolute dread on Bryn's face. "You came," she said, her voice tight. "You told me it was about money. Bryn." Of course I came. Bryn didn't waste time with pleasantries. She didn't ask how I was feeling or if I had recovered from Marjorie's comments at dinner the night before. She just reached into her oversized tote bag and pulled out a manila folder. She slid it across the table. keeping her hand flat on top of it for a second, as if she were terrified to let it go. "You know I work in fraud detection at Lakeview Community Credit Union," she said. It wasn't a question. "It is my job to look for patterns, anomalies, things that do not fit." "I know," I said. "You are the reason Nate moved our joint savings there. He said you got us a better interest rate." "I did," she nodded. "But being an employee also means I see things. Flags come up on accounts that are linked to family members. Usually, I just ignore them. It is usually just Mom moving money around for tax purposes, or Nate paying a contractor. But 3 days ago, a flag popped up on your joint checking account, the one you use for the mortgage and the baby fund." I felt a cold prickle at the base of my neck. "What kind of flag?" "A large transfer initiated by an authorized secondary user," Bryn said. She lifted her hand and tapped the folder. "Open it." I flipped the folder open. Inside was a printout of a transaction history. It was standard banking data, lines of dates and merchants, but one line was highlighted in neon yellow marker. I looked at the date. Last Tuesday, the same day Marjorie had called to demand the venue change. I looked at the amount. $9,800. I read out loud, my voice flat. "Keep reading," Bryn whispered. "Look at the authorization code." I scanned the line. Next to the amount, there was a code, a UTH-USER:"M, CALDW, ELL. My brain stopped for a second. M. Caldwell, Marjorie Caldwell. "Why does your mother have authorized access to our joint account?" I asked, looking up at Bryn. The air in the coffee shop suddenly felt very thin. "Nate added her 6 years ago," Bryn explained, talking fast. "Back when he was single and traveling for work, he put her on the account so she could pay his bills if he was out of the country. He never took her off. Kylie, he probably forgot, or he just didn't think it mattered. He didn't think it mattered that his mother had a key to our life savings." "He trusts her," Bryn said, her eyes pleading with me to understand the sickness of their family dynamic. "He thinks she would never hurt him, but look at where the money went." I looked back at the paper. The recipient field didn't list a store or a contractor. It listed a company name I didn't recognize. LS Legal Services Holdings, LLC. Legal services? I frowned. Why would she pay a legal service company $9,800 out of our account? "I looked them up," Bryn said. "It is a retainer firm, the kind you use when you are preparing for litigation but want to keep it off the books for a while. It is aggressive. Kylie, it is not for estate planning. It is for offense." My mind raced back to the dinner, Marjorie bragging about getting paperwork in order for the family. She had said it so casually while cutting her roast beef. I had assumed she meant her will or a trust fund. I hadn't realized she was using our money to pay for something that required a legal retainer. "There is more," Bryn said. Her voice dropped even lower. She looked around the shop again to make sure no one was listening. "That transfer was just the theft. The next page is the fraud." I turned the page. It was a screen capture of a credit inquiry log. "What is this?" "That," Bryn said, pointing a trembling finger, "is a soft pull on your credit report. Kylie, not Nate's, yours." I stared at the paper. My name, my social security number, partially redacted, and a request for a new line of credit, a credit card with a $20,000 limit. "The application was flagged because the address didn't match your driver's license," Bryn said. "The applicant used an address on Willow Creek Drive." "That is Marjorie's address," I said. The anger was starting to replace the shock. It was a cold, hard rage that settled in my chest. "She tried to open a credit card in my name?" "She tried to open a joint line of credit," Bryn corrected. "In your name and Nate's name, but with the billing address at her house, the system blocked it pending verification. But the attempt is there. Tuesday afternoon, 2 hours before she transferred the $9,800. I sat back in the chair. The pieces were clicking together. The control, the insults, the way she treated me like an irresponsible child. It wasn't just personality, it was a strategy. If she could ruin my credit, if she could drain our cash reserves, She could make us dependent on her. Or worse, she could frame me. She is stealing from us, I said. And she is trying to commit identity fraud. She thinks she is protecting Nate, Bryn said, tears welling up in her eyes. I heard her on the phone with Aunt Sylvia a month ago. She said she needed to secure the assets before the baby came. She thinks you are going to take Nate for everything he has. She has convinced herself that she is the hero saving the family fortune from the outsider. I make more money than Nate does, I said. It was a fact, a simple, statistical fact. She doesn't care about facts. Kylie, she cares about control. Bryn reached across the table and grabbed my hand. Her palms were damp. You cannot tell Nate I gave you these papers. If Mom finds out I breached bank privacy protocols to show you this, she will have me fired. She knows the CEO. She will destroy my life. I won't tell him where I got it, I promised. I pulled my hand back and closed the folder. But I am going to use it. What are you going to do? I am going to go home, I said, standing up, and I'm going to ask my husband a very simple question. Kylie, be careful, Bryn warned. Nate has spent 32 years being programmed to believe everything she does is out of love. He might not believe you even with the paper in front of him. Then he is going to have a very hard night, I said. I picked up the folder. It felt heavy, heavier than paper should feel. It felt like a weapon. Thank you, Bryn, I said. Bryn wiped a tear from her cheek. I just didn't want to stand there at the baby shower and watch you get blindsided. I know what she is planning. I don't know the details. But I know she has something big planned. She keeps talking about the reveal. Oh, there will be a reveal, I said, my hand resting on my stomach. My daughter kicked, hard, as if she agreed. But it won't be the one she thinks. I walked out of the coffee shop and into the blinding sunlight of the parking lot. I sat in my car for a moment, the folder on the passenger seat. I looked at the dashboard clock. It was 10:45 in the morning. Marjorie had stolen $9,800 from a pregnant woman. She had tried to open a credit line in my name, and tonight I was going to find out if my husband was an accomplice or just a victim. I put the car in reverse. I didn't turn on the radio. I needed silence to plan. I needed to draft the interrogation, because that is what it was going to be. Not a conversation, an interrogation. I waited until Saturday afternoon. I waited until Nate had finished his workout, eaten his lunch, and settled onto the couch to watch the pre-game commentary for a basketball game he didn't actually care about. I wanted him comfortable. I wanted his guard down, because when you drop a bomb on someone's reality, you want to make sure they are sitting down. I walked into the living room and stood between him and the television. I didn't turn it off. I just stood there, blocking the view of the commentators, my hands resting on top of my stomach. Nate, I said. My voice wasn't loud. It was the flat, neutral tone I used when I had to tell a client their risk portfolio was bleeding money. Does your mother have access to our checking account? Nate blinked, leaning to the side to try and see the screen behind me. What, babe? Move over. The game is starting. I am not moving. Nate, answer the question. Does Marjorie have authorized user access to the account where we keep the mortgage money? He sighed, pausing the TV with an exaggerated click of the remote. I don't know, Kai, maybe? I think I added her back when I was doing that consulting gig in London in 2019. Why does it matter? It matters, I said. Because yesterday, $9,800 disappeared from that account. Nate laughed. It was a short, disbelief-filled sound. Okay, very funny. You almost gave me a heart attack. Did we get hacked? We didn't get hacked. Nate, we got robbed. Check the app. He looked at me, his smile fading when he realized I wasn't moving. He pulled his phone out of his pocket, unlocked it, and tapped the banking icon. I watched his face. I watched the blood drain out of his cheeks as the balance loaded. I watched his eyes widen as he scrolled down to the transaction history. What the? He whispered. Transfer to L&S Legal Services? Who is that? Click the transaction details. Nate, look at the authorized user. He tapped the screen. He stared at it for a long time, 5 seconds, 10 seconds, enough time for the denial to die and the horror to set in. "Mom," he said, his voice cracking. "Why would Mom take— This is almost 10 grand. "Call her," I said. "Kylie, there has to be a mistake. Maybe she clicked the wrong account. She has her own accounts at the same bank. Call her, Nate. Put it on speaker." He dialed. His hand was shaking. I could see the internal struggle, the part of him that wanted to defend her fighting against the math staring him in the face. The phone rang twice. "Hello? Darling?" Marjorie's voice filled the room, bright and cheerful, completely at odds with the theft she had just committed. "Are you getting excited for tomorrow? I just picked up the balloons." "Mom," Nate said. He sounded like a child who had broken a vase. "Mom, did you move money out of my account?" There was a pause, a silence that stretched just a little too long to be innocent. "Oh, you saw that already?" Her tone shifted. It wasn't apologetic. It was dismissive, like she was swatting away a fly. "Nathan, don't use that tone. I didn't move money. I borrowed some liquidity. I am preparing a rather large surprise for you and Kylie, and my liquid cash was tied up in a CD that doesn't mature until Tuesday. I will put it back next week." "A surprise?" Nate repeated, blinking. "Mom, you took $9,800 without asking. That is our mortgage payment. That is the nursery money." "It is for the baby, Nathan," Marjorie snapped, her voice sharpening into that familiar weaponized guilt. "My God, you act like I spent it on shoes. I am trying to do something nice for your family, something for your future. And instead of a thank you, I get an interrogation? I am hurt. Nathan, truly hurt, after everything I have done to make tomorrow perfect." I watched Nate crumble. It was fascinating and horrifying in equal measure. He had the evidence. He had the crime. But the moment she played the victim card, his spine turned to water. I know you are doing a lot. Mom," Nate stammered. It's a lot of money to move without telling us. Kylie is freaking out." "Well, tell Kylie to calm down," Marjorie said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial soothe. "Stress is bad for the baby. I will have the money back in the account by Wednesday. I promise. It is just a temporary bridge. You trust your mother, don't you?" Nate looked at me. I was shaking my head, mouthing the word no. "Yeah," Nate said to the phone. "Yeah, I trust you. Mom, just please tell us next time." "Of course, darling. I have to run. The florist is here. Love you." Click. Nate lowered the phone. He let out a long breath, as if he had just survived a bomb disposal, not realizing the bomb was still ticking. "See?" he said, looking at me with a weak, pleading smile. "It's fine. It's just a loan. She's buying us a gift or something. She'll put it back on Wednesday." "She stole from us." "Nate," I said, my voice trembling with suppressed rage. "She didn't ask. She took, and she lied about it being an accident. She knew exactly what she was doing." "Kylie, please." Nate stood up, walking over to me and trying to put his hands on my shoulders. I stepped back. "She's my mom. She has never stolen from me. She just has no boundaries. We know this, but she's paying it back. Can we let it go for 24 hours? "Let it go?" "The shower's tomorrow," Nate said. "All the relatives are coming. Summer is coming. If we make a scene about this, it's going to ruin everything. Mom will cry. Aunt Sylvia will start drinking, and everyone will look at us like we're the crazy ones. Please, Kai, for me, just don't bring it up tomorrow. Let's just get through the party. Let her have her moment, and then I will deal with the bank stuff on Monday." I looked at him. I looked at the man I had vowed to spend my life with, and I realized that he wasn't asking me to keep the peace. He was asking me to be complicit in my own abuse because it was easier for him than standing up to his mother. "You want me to smile at the woman who stole 10 grand from us because you are afraid she might cry?" I asked. "I am asking you not to blow up my family 1 month before our daughter is born," Nate said, and for the first time, There was a flash of irritation in his eyes. "You know how she is. You knew what you were marrying into. Just handle it. For one day." "Okay," I said. Nate sagged with relief. "Thank you. Seriously, you're the best." He kissed my forehead. It felt like a betrayal. "I'm going to go finish watching the game." He sat back down. He unpaused the TV. He went back to his basketball game. I turned around and walked out of the room. I walked into the home office and locked the door. "Just handle it," he had said. So I did. I sat down at my computer. I didn't cry. I didn't have time to cry. I logged into the bank website. I couldn't get the money back. Not yet. But I could stop the bleeding. I changed the password to a string of random characters that Nate would never guess. I went into the settings and removed Marjorie Caldwell as an authorized user. I set up a text alert for any transaction over $1. Then I went to the credit bureaus. I placed a freeze on my credit. I placed a freeze on Nate's credit. Then I printed. I printed the transaction history showing the transfer to L&S Legal Services. I printed the timestamp log. I printed the terms of service that explicitly stated unauthorized access was a federal crime. I stapled the pages together. My phone buzzed. It was Paige. "Paige. Outside. Let me in before I break the door down." I went downstairs and let her in. Paige Holloway has been my best friend since college. She is 5'2", wears combat boots with floral dresses, and has a loyalty setting that borders on aggressive. She took one look at my face and dropped her purse on the floor. "Okay, who am I killing? Nate or his mom?" "Both," I said. "But first, I need to show you something." We went to the kitchen. I laid the paperwork out on the island. I told her everything. The money. The legal firm. The credit card attempt. Nate's reaction. Paige read the papers. She didn't look shocked. She looked vindicated. "I told you," she muttered. "I told you she was a reptile. But this is felony level." "Nate asked me not to make a scene," I said, pouring myself a glass of water because I really wanted wine. "He wants me to play nice tomorrow." "And are you going to?" Paige asked, looking up at me. I looked at the stack of papers. I thought about Marjorie's voice on the phone, dismissive and arrogant. I thought about reason number 23 waiting for me in that envelope, though I didn't know it existed yet. "I am going to go to that party," I said. "I am going to wear the dress I want. I am going to smile. And if she pushes me, Paige, if she tries to pull one of her stunts, I will be there," Paige said. She pulled her phone out and tapped the camera lens. "Fully charged, 4K video, cloud backup enabled. If she wants a show, we will give her a documentary." "She thinks she has won," I whispered, touching my stomach. "She thinks because I am pregnant and tired, and because Nate is a coward, that I will just roll over." "She forgot one thing," Paige grinned, a sharp, dangerous grin. "What's that?" "She forgot that you are the one who balances the books." I took the papers and slid them into my bag. Nate was in the other room, cheering for a 3-point shot, completely unaware that his wife had just armed herself for a nuclear war. "Tomorrow," I said. "We stick to the plan. You stay in the corner, you record everything, and do not interfere unless I give the signal." "What's the signal?" "If I start reading," I said. "That's the signal." I didn't know how prophetic those words were. I just knew that the peace Nate wanted was a lie, and tomorrow, the truth was going to be expensive. Sunday morning arrived with a sky the color of bruised slate. The air was thick with humidity, the kind that makes your hair stick to the back of your neck the second you step outside, inside our master bedroom. The atmosphere was even heavier. It was the silence before a storm. At 9 o'clock sharp, the doorbell rang. It was a courier service. They delivered a long, opaque garment bag with the boutique logo of Marjorie's favorite designer stamped in gold foil. I carried it upstairs, my heart doing a slow, heavy thud against my ribs. Nate was in the shower, trying to wash away the anxiety of the day. I unzipped the bag. Inside hung a dress that could only be described as aggressive mint green. It was chiffon, shapeless, and covered in ruffles that would make me look like a giant. Floating cabbage. My phone buzzed. It was Marjorie. "Did you get the package, darling?" she asked the moment I picked up. "No hello. No, how are you? Just a compliance check." "I got it. Marjorie," I said, staring at the dress. "What is this?" "It is for the photos," she said, her voice bright and unyielding. "I spoke to the photographer, and he agreed that mint is the only color that will pop against the floral arrangements I chose. The theme is Spring Awakening. Kylie, you need to match the aesthetic. The ivory dress you mentioned is just too stark. It will wash you out." I zipped the bag back up. "I am not wearing mint green. Marjorie, I am wearing the ivory dress I bought." There was a silence on the other end of the line. It lasted for 5 full seconds. It wasn't an empty silence. It was a loaded one. It was the sound of a woman recalculating her strategy when a pawn refuses to move. "Kylie," she said finally, her voice dropping an octave. "I have put a lot of money into this event, a lot of effort. I am simply asking you to look the part. Is that really too much to ask? To look cohesive with the family?" "I will look fine," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I will see you at the venue." "Fine," she clipped. Then, the tone shifted again. It became sugary, almost excited. "Well, wear what you want. It might actually be better. It will make the surprise stand out more." "What surprise?" I asked, my grip tightening on the phone. "Oh, just a little gift I have been working on," she said. "I have been preparing it for months. It is very personal. Kylie, I think it is really going to clear the air. It is going to show everyone exactly who you are and what you bring to this family." My stomach turned over. "Marjorie, if you are planning something, see you soon, dear." She hung up. I stood there, holding the phone, feeling the blood rush in my ears. Very personal. Show everyone exactly who you are. Those weren't promises. They were threats wrapped in gift wrap. Paige was sitting on the edge of my bed, watching me. She had arrived 10 minutes earlier to help me with my hair, or more accurately, to act as my bodyguard. "Let me guess," Paige said, picking at a loose thread on the quilt. "She is bringing a slideshow of your awkward teenage years? Or maybe she hired a skywriter to spell out Kylie sucks?" "She said she has a personal gift," I said, tossing the phone onto the duvet. "She said it will show everyone what I bring to the family." Paige stopped picking at the thread. She looked at me, her expression serious. In mother-in-law speak, personal usually means humiliation. It means she found something she thinks she can use against you. A diary, an old debt, a rumor. "She can try," I said, walking over to my dresser. "But she doesn't know what I am bringing." I opened the drawer where I had hidden the folder. I took out the papers I had printed the night before. The bank statement showing the $9,800 transfer, the screenshot of the credit inquiry, the log of unauthorized access timestamps. I had made 3 copies. One was in my purse. One was in the diaper bag, and one I handed to Paige. "Put this in your bag," I said. "If she tries to confiscate my things, you have the backup." Paige took the papers, folded them neatly, and slid them into the inside pocket of her blazer. "I feel like we are going into a deposition, not a baby shower." "We are," I said. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from Bryn. "Bryn, I am at the venue helping her set up. I just heard her talking to Aunt Sylvia. She keeps checking an envelope. I heard her say, 'I have the list,' and wait for the right moment. She looks manic. Kylie, please be careful. A list." I stared at the screen. "What kind of list? A list of guests? A list of grievances?" "What does it say?" Paige asked. "Bryn says Marjorie has a list," I said. "And she is waiting for the right moment." Just then, the bathroom door opened and Nate walked out. He was dressed in a navy suit that Marjorie had probably selected for him. He looked tired. There were dark circles under his eyes, and he was moving with a nervous, jerky energy. He looked at me, then at the mint green dress bag on the floor. "You're not wearing the green thing?" he asked. "No." "Okay," he exhaled. Okay, good. I hate that color anyway. He ran a hand through his damp hair. Look, Kai, I know things are tense. I know yesterday was a lot. But Mom sent me a text this morning. She said she wants today to be a fresh start. She said she has a special presentation planned. A presentation? I repeated. Since when do baby showers have presentations? She just wants to welcome the baby, Nate said. Adjusting his tie in the mirror, he was avoiding eye contact. Let's just let her have her speech, eat some cake, and go home, okay? His phone pinged on the dresser. He glanced at it, and his face tightened. I saw the name on the screen because I was standing right next to it. It wasn't Marjorie, it was Aunt Sylvia. Aunt Sylvia. She is setting up a podium. Nathan, a podium. Who are you protecting? Your wife or your mother? You cannot protect both. Nate stared at the message. He didn't reply. He flipped the phone face down. Who was that? I asked, giving him one last chance to be honest. Just work, he said. My heart didn't break this time. It just went cold. He was lying. He was lying to protect his own comfort. He saw the podium. He knew his mother was planning a spectacle, and he was still hoping that if he just ignored it, it would go away. Okay, Nate, I said softly, let's go to the party. I went into the closet and pulled out the ivory dress. It was silk, elegant, and simple. I put it on. I smoothed the fabric over my bump. I looked at myself in the full-length mirror. I didn't look like a victim. I looked like a mother. I thought about my daughter, Mila. I hadn't met her yet, but I knew her. I knew her hiccups. I knew her sleep patterns. And I knew one thing for absolute certain. She was not going to grow up in a house where love was conditional. She was not going to grow up watching her mother be small so her grandmother could be big. She was not going to learn that silence is the price of admission to this family. I grabbed my purse. I felt the crinkle of the paper inside, the data, the proof. Paige, I said, turning to my friend. The battery? 100%, Paige said, patting her pocket. And I cleared the memory card. I can record for 4 hours straight. Good. I walked past Nate. He tried to take my hand, but I pretended I needed to adjust my earring. I walked down the stairs, out the door, and into the humid Sunday air. I wasn't going to a party. I was going to a showdown. And for the first time in my life. I wasn't afraid of Marjorie Caldwell. I was just waiting for her to make her move. Because the moment she did, I was going to make sure the whole world saw exactly who she was. The Wellington Ridge Clubhouse was not designed for casual gatherings. It was designed to make people feel underdressed. As we pulled up to the portico, the building loomed over us, a sprawling structure of white columns and manicured ivy that looked less like a community center and more like a plantation house that had been scrubbed of its history and repackaged as a wedding venue. The parking lot was full. Luxury SUVs and sedans lined the asphalt like a dealership row. I checked my lipstick in the visor mirror one last time. My hand was steady, but my heart was hammering against my ribs 140 beats a minute. I touched the ivory silk of my dress. It was cool and smooth. It was my armor. Ready? Nate asked. He had turned the car off, but he was gripping the steering wheel like he was afraid to let go. As I will ever be, I said. We walked up the stone steps. The double doors were propped open, and the scent hit me first. Peonies. Hundreds of them. The smell was overwhelming, cloyingly sweet, masking the stale air of air conditioning. We stepped inside, and I stopped dead. Marjorie had not lied about the theme. Spring awakening was an understatement. The ballroom had been transformed into a suffocating embrace of mint green and pale peach. There were mint tablecloths. There were mint balloons forming an archway. There were mint ribbons tied around every single chair. It looked like a bottle of mouthwash had exploded inside a bakery. And then I saw the trap. It wasn't a physical cage. It was a visual one. Standing near the punch bowl, holding a crystal cup, was Summer Lane. My breath hitched. Summer looked breathtaking, in the way a doll looks breathtaking. She was wearing a dress that was the exact, precise shade of mint green as the tablecloths and the balloons. It wasn't a coincidence, it was a uniform. She blended perfectly into the room, looking like she had grown out of the floorboards, a natural extension of the decor. I looked around. Marjorie's sisters were wearing mint. The cousins were wearing peach. Even the staff were wearing green ties. And there I was, in stark, defiant ivory. I stood out like a stain. I looked like the mistake. I looked like the one person who hadn't read the memo, the outsider who refused to blend in with the family aesthetic. It was a masterclass in visual alienation. Marjorie had engineered a reality where Summer Lane looked like the natural wife, and I looked like the intruder. Summer saw me. Her smile faltered. She looked uncomfortable, shifting her weight from one foot to the other. She gave a small, awkward wave, her eyes darting toward the back of the room as if she wanted to escape. She knew. She had to know she was being used as a prop, but she was too polite, too Southern, to say no to Marjorie Caldwell. "Kylie! Nathan!" The voice cut through the low hum of conversation. Marjorie swept toward us. She was wearing a cream suit that matched my dress more than the decor. Positioning herself as the only other individual in the room, the queen bee to my worker drone, she bypassed Nate and came straight for me. She wrapped her arms around me in a hug that felt like a python constricting its prey. She smelled of Chanel No. 5 and hairspray. She pulled back just an inch, her hands gripping my shoulders, her face close to mine so only I could hear her. "You didn't wear the color I chose," she whispered, her eyes glittering with malice. "Perfect. You look exactly as difficult as I need you to be." She pulled away before I could respond, turning to the room with a wide, benevolent smile. "Look who has arrived, the guest of honor." There was a polite ripple of applause. I felt 50 pairs of eyes on me. They looked at my ivory dress. They looked at Summer's mint dress. I saw the confusion. I saw the judgment. Why couldn't she just coordinate? Why does she have to be so different? Nate walked up beside me, placing a hand on the small of my back. He was beaming. He looked at the flowers, the balloons, the sheer scale of the event. "Wow," he said, shaking his head. "Mom really went all out, didn't she? Look at this place. Kai, she really loves you. You don't do this for someone unless you care about them." I looked at my husband. He was looking at the surface. He saw the expensive flowers and the open bar. He didn't see the chessboard. He didn't understand that the queen was moving into position to take the king. "She is very dedicated." "Nate," I said, my voice flat. "I am going to grab a drink," Nate said, patting my back. "Do you want water?" "No," I said. "I want to find Bryn." I watched him walk away toward the bar, where he was immediately intercepted by Summer's parents. They clapped him on the shoulder, laughing, pulling him into their circle. He didn't resist. He looked comfortable there, more comfortable than he had looked in our own living room all week. I scanned the room for Bryn. She was late. That wasn't like her. I finally spotted her slipping through the side door near the catering kitchen. She looked wreck. Her face was pale, her lipstick applied a little crookedly, as if her hands had been shaking. She wasn't wearing mint or peach. She was wearing black. I made a beeline for her, weaving through the crowd of aunts who tried to stop me to touch my stomach. I smiled. I nodded. I kept moving. "Bryn," I said when I reached her. She jumped, nearly dropping her clutch. "Kylie, oh God, you are here. Of course I'm here. What is wrong? You look like you have seen a ghost." Bryn grabbed my arm and pulled me toward the shadow of a large potted fern. Her eyes were wide and terrified. "I heard her," Bryn whispered. "I was in the hallway, helping carry in the favors. Mom was talking to the coordinator. She was laughing. Kylie, she was holding that thick white envelope she keeps in her safe." "The envelope?" I asked. "What is in it?" "I don't know the whole thing," Bryn said, her voice trembling. "But I heard her say the number. She said, 'Wait until she hears reason number 23. It is going to be the highlight of the afternoon.' And then she laughed. It wasn't a nice laugh. It was hateful. Reason number 23. The number stuck in my head. Why 23? What was so specific about that number? Where is she now? I asked. She is at the front, Bryn said. She is checking the microphone. I felt a hand on my other shoulder. I turned around. It was Aunt Sylvia. Sylvia was holding a double scotch. Neat. She looked tired, her eyeliner a little smudged, but her gaze was sharp as a razor. She looked at Bryn, then at me. You know what is happening, don't you? Sylvia asked. Her voice was gravelly, the voice of a woman who has seen too many family empires rise and fall on silence. I think I do, I said. She has been planning this since the day Nathan put a ring on your finger. Sylvia said. She took a sip of her drink. She cannot stand that you have your own money. She cannot stand that you have a brain. Today isn't a party, honey. It is a public execution. Nate thinks she is just being nice, I said, looking across the room where Nate was now laughing with Summer Lane. Nathan is a good boy, Sylvia said, following my gaze. But he is weak. He has been trained to be weak. He thinks peace is the absence of conflict. He doesn't understand that sometimes peace is just the silence after the bomb goes off. Sylvia leaned in close. Her breath smelled of expensive scotch and peppermint. Do not let her steamroll you. Kylie, that is what she expects. She expects you to cry. She expects you to run away so she can comfort Nathan and tell everyone how unstable you are. Do not give her that satisfaction. I don't plan to, I said. I patted my purse. I brought my own speech. Good, Sylvia nodded, because silence is how she wins. She counts on our manners. She counts on us being too polite to scream while she cuts our throats. I looked around the room. Paige was standing in the far corner, near the DJ booth. She was holding her phone up, pretending to take a selfie, but the lens was angled directly at the center of the room. She caught my eye and gave a subtle, barely perceptible nod. The camera was rolling. The cloud backup was active, the music volume lowered, the jazz playlist faded out. A sharp, crystalline sound cut through the chatter. Clink, clink, clink. I turned toward the front of the room. Marjorie was standing on the small raised platform that had been set up for the toasts. She was holding a champagne flute in one hand and a spoon in the other. Next to her, on a small easel that had been covered by a velvet cloth, was a large, thick white envelope. The room went quiet. The conversation died down. The waiters stopped moving. Marjorie smiled. It was the smile of a predator who has just cornered its prey in a dead-end alley. If I could have everyone's attention, please, Marjorie said. Her voice was amplified by the microphone, booming slightly in the cavernous room. I have a few words I would like to say, and I have a very special presentation for my daughter-in-law, Kylie. She looked directly at me. Her eyes locked onto mine. There was no warmth in them, only triumph. Nate, bring Kylie up to the front. Would you? She commanded. Nate trotted over to me, smiling, oblivious. He took my hand. Come on, Kai. Speech time. I looked at Aunt Sylvia. She raised her glass in a silent toast of courage. I looked at Bryn. She was biting her lip so hard it was turning white. I looked at Paige. The phone was steady. I took Nate's hand, but I didn't squeeze it back. I walked toward the stage. I walked toward the mint green balloons and the woman who had stolen my money. I walked toward the trap she had set. But she didn't know that I wasn't walking into it blind. She didn't know that I had already disarmed the mechanism. She thought she was about to end my marriage. She had no idea she was about to end her own reign. I stopped in front of the platform. Marjorie beamed down at me. Thank you all for coming, she began. The show had started, and I was ready to rewrite the ending. The microphone screeched briefly, a high-pitched feedback loop that made everyone wince. Before Marjorie's voice settled into a smooth, practiced contralto, she held the thick white envelope with both hands, presenting it like a diploma. We all know that marriage is a journey, Marjorie said, beaming at the crowd of 50 or 60 guests, and sometimes A new mother needs a little guidance, a little reality check to prepare for the future. So, I have compiled a list, just a few observations I have made over the last 3 years, things I believe Nathan needs to consider as he enters this new chapter of fatherhood. She paused for effect. The room was silent, expecting a sentimental poem or perhaps a savings bond. "I call this," Marjorie announced, her voice ringing out clearly, "47 reasons my son should divorce you." For a heartbeat, there was silence, and then the laughter started. It began with the uncles near the bar, a deep, belly-shaking chuckle. Then the cousins joined in. Then the neighbors. They laughed because it was absurd. They laughed because they thought it was a roast, a dark comedy bit designed to break the ice. It was the kind of thing you might see at a bachelor party, not a baby shower. Classic Marjorie, their faces said, always pushing the envelope. Nate was standing next to me. He nudged my arm, grinning. "See?" he whispered, leaning in close. "It's a joke, Kai. She's doing a comedy bit. Come on, laugh. Don't look so stiff." "It doesn't sound like a joke, Nate," I said. "Go on, Kylie." Marjorie beckoned me closer, thrusting the envelope toward my chest. "Open it. Read a few for the guests. We can all use a good laugh at our own expense. Can't we?" I looked at the envelope. It was heavy, linen stock, expensive. I took it. My hands were trembling, not from fear, but from the adrenaline dumping into my bloodstream. I tore the seal. Inside was a document. It wasn't handwritten. It was typed, formatted with bullet points and headers, stapled in the top left corner. It looked like a contract. It looked like an indictment. "Go ahead, dear," Marjorie urged into the microphone. "Read the first one." I cleared my throat. The room quieted down, eager for the punchline. "Reason number 1," I read, my voice steady. "She refuses to assimilate into the family culture and insists on maintaining an abrasive level of independence." A few people chuckled nervously. It wasn't funny. It was just mean. "Read another," someone shouted from the back, likely one of Marjorie's bridge club friends who had started on the Chardonnay early. I scanned the page. Reason number 5. She lacks the domestic instinct required to support a high-value husband, often prioritizing her own career over his comfort. The laughter was thinner now. Nate shifted his weight beside me. "Okay, Mom," he said, his smile looking a little fixed. "Maybe skip to the funny ones. They are all funny." "Nathan," Marjorie said, her eyes cold and hard as flint. "Keep reading. Kylie, get to the section about finances. That is my favorite." I flipped the page. My eyes ran down the list. Reason 12. Her background is questionable. Reason 18. She is emotionally volatile. And then I stopped. I stopped because the text at the bottom of page 2 made the air leave my lungs. I read it twice to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. I looked up at Marjorie. She was smiling that tight, superior smile, the smile of a woman who believes she has just checkmated her opponent. She thought I would be too embarrassed to read it. She thought I would fold, cry, and run away, leaving her to spin the narrative. She didn't know I had the receipts. I found an interesting one. "Marjorie," I said into the silence. "Reason number 23. "Oh, do share," she said, taking a sip of her champagne. "That is a very important one. Can I read it out loud? Every word?" I asked. "Of course, sweetheart," she said, using the endearment like a slap. "We have no secrets here." I looked at the crowd. I looked at Summer Lane, who was staring at her shoes. I looked at Bryn, who was holding her breath. I looked at Paige, who held her phone steady in the corner. Reason number 23. I projected my voice to the back of the room. "Kylie is financially incompetent and negligent with family assets. As proof, I, Marjorie, was able to transfer $9,800 from their joint account and initiate a credit application in her name without her even noticing. She is clearly unfit to manage the family wealth." The silence that followed was absolute. It wasn't the silence of anticipation. It was the silence of a vacuum. The laughter died so instantly it felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. A glass clinked against a table somewhere, the sound echoing like a gunshot. Marjorie's smile didn't fade. It froze. It stuck there, a grotesque mask of confidence that was rapidly cracking as her brain processed what she had just heard. She had written it down. She had been so arrogant, so sure of her own righteousness, that she had documented her own felony as a reason for divorce. She thought she was proving my incompetence. She hadn't realized she was confessing to theft. Nate turned to me. His face was gray. "What?" he whispered. "Read that again." "I don't need to read it again." "Nate," I said, "but I do need to show you this." I reached into my purse. I pulled out the folder I had prepared with Bryn and Paige. I pulled out the bank statement with the neon yellow highlighter. I pulled out the credit alert screenshot. "Reason number 23 says she moved the money to prove I wouldn't notice," I said, holding the papers up so the room could see them. "But I did notice. Here's the bank transfer record. $9,800 moved to L&S Legal Services on Tuesday. Authorized by Marjorie Caldwell." I held up the second paper. "And here's the fraud alert from the credit bureau," I continued, my voice ringing with a clarity that surprised even me. "An application for a $20,000 line of credit. Applicant address, Willow Creek Drive. That is your house, isn't it, Marjorie?" I turned to my mother-in-law. She had gone pale. Not just pale, but translucent. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish on a dock. For the first time in the 5 years I had known her, she was speechless. She gripped the podium, her knuckles white. I was," Marjorie stammered. Her voice was thin, stripped of its usual power. "It was a test. I was testing her. It was a lesson." "It is not a lesson, Mom," Nate said. His voice was loud, louder than I had ever heard it. He stepped away from her, as if she were radioactive. "You stole 10 grand from us? And you wrote it down?" The room exploded into whispers. The shock had broken, and now the judgment was rushing in. I heard the words police, fraud, and crazy rippling through the crowd. "I did it for you, Nathan," Marjorie shrieked, finally finding her voice, though it was shrill and desperate. "She is going to ruin you. I had to secure the assets. I was going to give it back." "You tried to open a credit card in my name, Marjorie," I said, stepping closer to her. "That is identity theft. That is a federal crime, and you just confessed to it in front of 50 witnesses because you were so desperate to humiliate me that you forgot that laws apply to you too." Marjorie looked around the room, searching for an ally. She looked at her sisters, but they were staring at the floor. She looked at Summer Lane, but Summer had backed away toward the exit. She looked at Nate. Nate was staring at the list in my hand. He looked like a man who had just watched his childhood home burn down. "Reason number 23, Nate muttered. He looked up at his mother, his eyes wet with betrayal. "You put a lien on my marriage. You stole my money, and you threw a party to brag about it." "Nathan, please." Marjorie reached out for him. "It is just money. We can fix it. I was protecting the family." "I am the family," I said. I dropped the list on the podium. It landed with a soft thud. "And I think we are done here." I turned to walk away, but I didn't get far before the sound of sobbing broke out behind me. It wasn't me. It was Marjorie. She had collapsed against the microphone stand, wailing, a sound of pure, unadulterated victimhood. But this time, nobody moved to comfort her. The guests just watched, their champagne glasses sweating in their hands, realizing they had just witnessed the self-destruction of a matriarch. I looked across the room at Paige. She lowered her phone. She gave me a grim smile and a thumbs up. We had the footage. We had the confession. We had the documents. Marjorie wanted a show. She wanted a reason for a divorce. Well, she got her reason. But she was the one who was going to be served the papers. The sound of Marjorie crying into the microphone was the only thing filling the room. A jagged, theatrical sobbing that might have worked on a different audience. But this audience had seen the bank statement. They had seen the fraud alert. And more importantly, they were tired. The illusion of the perfect Caldwell family had shattered, leaving only sharp edges and uncomfortable truths. Nate looked at his mother, but he didn't move to comfort her. He looked paralyzed, trapped between 30 years of conditioning and the undeniable reality of the paper lying on the podium. "It is a misunderstanding," Marjorie wailed, lifting her head to look for a sympathetic face. "I was just moving funds to protect them. Bryn, tell them how complicated these banking systems are." All eyes turned to Bryn. My sister-in-law stepped out from behind the potted fern where she had been hiding. She wiped her hands on her black dress, took a deep breath, and walked into the center of the room. She didn't look at her mother. She looked at her brother. "It wasn't a misunderstanding. Nate," Bryn said. Her voice was shaking, but it was audible. "I work in fraud detection. I saw the logs. Mom used her authorized access to transfer $9,800 to a legal retainer firm. And the credit application? It was flagged as high-risk fraud because she tried to bypass the identity verification steps. She did it, Nate. She did exactly what she wrote in that letter." "You ungrateful little—" Marjorie started, her face twisting into a snarl that wiped away the tears instantly. "Stop it, Marjorie," a gravelly voice cut in. Aunt Sylvia stepped forward, her glass of scotch finally empty. She walked up to Nate, placing a hand on his shoulder. "She did the same thing to your cousin Mark 10 years ago. Nathan, why do you think he moved to Seattle and never came back? She tried to control his wife, tried to manage their money, and when they set boundaries, she spread rumors that Mark was gambling. It is her playbook. Control the money, control the narrative." Nate looked from Bryn to Sylvia, and then back to the woman in the cream suit who was currently vibrating with rage on the stage. "Is that true?" Nate asked, his voice barely a whisper. "They are lying to you," Marjorie screamed, pointing a finger at me. "She turned them against me. That woman is poison. Nathan!" Excuse me." The voice came from near the exit. It was Summer Lane. She looked like she wanted the floor to open up and swallow her whole. She was clutching her mint green purse, her face flushed with embarrassment. "I think I should go," Summer said, looking at Nate. "But, Nate, I just want you to know, I didn't want to come today. Your mom called me 5 times. She told me you guys were having trouble. She told me Kylie was unstable. She said if I came wearing this color, it would help you remember happier times. I felt weird about it, but she made it sound like I was doing a favor for an old friend." Summer looked at me, her eyes apologetic. "I am sorry. Kylie, I didn't know I was being used as a prop." That was the final brick in the wall. Nate looked at Summer, the woman his mother had tried to weaponize against his marriage. Then he looked at the list on the podium. Reason number 23. He walked up to the stage. He didn't run. He walked with a heavy, deliberate gait. He picked up the thick white envelope. He picked up the typed list. He looked at it one last time, as if trying to understand the psychology of a mother who would document her own theft. "You wrote it down," Nate said. He wasn't yelling. He sounded exhausted. "You stole from me. You stole from my wife. You tried to ruin my credit. And you were so proud of it, so sure that you were right, that you typed it out and read it to my friends. Nathan, listen to me." "No," Nate said. He dropped the paper on the floor. "No more listening. I want you to leave. Mom." Marjorie froze. "Excuse me?" "Leave." Nate pointed to the double doors. "Get out of this party. Get out of this building. Do not call me. Do not text me. Just go." "You are kicking me out?" Marjorie gasped, clutching her pearls in a gesture that was so cliché it was almost funny. "Of your own baby shower? After I paid for all of this?" "You paid for it with my money," Nate said, his voice hard. "So technically, I hosted it. Get out." Marjorie looked around the room. She saw the faces of her friends, her family, the neighbors. No one was smiling. No one was laughing. They were looking at her with a mixture of pity and disgust. Her power, built on decades of social manipulation and financial bullying, had evaporated in the span of 5 minutes. She straightened her spine. She fixed her hair. She sniffed, regaining a shred of her haughty composure. "You will regret this, Nathan," she hissed. "When she leaves you, and she will, do not come crawling back to my door." She stepped off the platform, head held high, and marched down the center aisle. The guests parted like the Red Sea, pulling back to avoid touching her. The only sound was the clicking of her heels on the hardwood floor. When the heavy doors slammed shut behind her, the room exhaled. I felt a hand on my arm. It was Nate. He looked wrecked. He looked like a man who had just amputated his own limb to save his life. "I am sorry," he whispered, pulling me into him. "I am so sorry, Kai." I rested my head on his chest. "I know." That night, we didn't go home to relax. We went home to fortify. The kitchen table became a command center. It was me, Nate, Bryn, and Aunt Sylvia. Paige had gone home to upload the footage to 3 separate cloud servers. "Just in case she tries to sue us for defamation," she had said, "we ordered pizza that no one really ate." Nate sat with his laptop, his face pale in the glow of the screen. "Okay," I said, running down my checklist. "Bank accounts?" "Done," Nate said, his voice flat. I closed the joint checking, opened a new one at a different bank, transferred the remaining balance. I disputed the transfer to the legal firm. The bank said since it was an authorized user, it might be tricky, but since I have the document where she confesses to moving it without permission, we have a case for theft. "Locks?" I asked. "Changed," Bryn said. She was scrolling through her phone. I called the locksmith on the way over. He rekeyed the front and back doors. Mom still has a key to the garage, but I unplugged the opener. "Email and social media?" "I blocked her on everything," Nate said. "And I sent an email to the extended family. Just a simple statement saying we are taking space and asking them to respect our privacy." Aunt Sylvia was sipping a cup of herbal tea, which was a significant departure from her usual scotch. She looked at Nate with a softness I hadn't seen before. "You did the right thing, honey," she told him. "I know it hurts. She is your mother, but she is also a shark, and sharks do not stop biting just because you ask them nicely." "I just don't get it," Nate said, rubbing his temples. "Why write it down? Why reason 23? Why give us the evidence?" "Because she didn't think it was evidence," I said. "She thought it was a performance review. She genuinely believed that her managing our money was a service, not a crime, in her mind. She wasn't stealing. She was correcting my errors." Nate shook his head. "It's sick. It's over," I said, reaching for his hand. "We have the boundaries now. She can't hurt us." But I was wrong. It wasn't over. The counterattack came 36 hours later. It was Tuesday morning. I was back at my desk at Cedar and Rowe Risk Analytics, trying to focus on a chaotic market report. My phone rang. It was the internal extension for human resources. "Kylie, this is Sarah from HR. Can you come down to my office? Bring your badge." My stomach dropped. Bring your badge is corporate code for "you are being escorted out." I walked down to the second floor, my mind racing. Had I made a compliance error? Had I missed a disclosure? I walked into Sarah's office. She looked uncomfortable. She held a piece of paper in her hand. "Kylie, sit down," she said. "We received a letter this morning. It was sent anonymously, but it makes some serious allegations regarding your mental health and financial stability." She slid the letter across the desk. I didn't need to look at the postmark to know who sent it. It was typed. Same font as the list. "To the management of Cedar and Rowe, it is my duty as a concerned citizen to inform you that Mrs. Kylie Hughes is currently undergoing a severe mental health crisis. She has exhibited erratic behavior, paranoid delusions regarding family finances, and has been involved in domestic disturbances, given her access to sensitive client data. She poses a significant liability to your firm." It went on for 2 paragraphs. It claimed I was bipolar. It claimed I was addicted to painkillers. It claimed I was being investigated for elder abuse. This is a lie, I said, looking up at Sarah. You know this is a lie. My performance reviews are stellar. I know. Kylie, Sarah said gently, but when we get a whistleblower complaint alleging instability, we have to investigate. It's policy, and, she hesitated. We received a similar letter regarding your husband, Nathan. His firm called us to cross-reference because the letters were almost identical. She had gone nuclear. Marjorie realized she had lost control of the Sun, so she decided to destroy the professionals. She was trying to get us fired. She was trying to cut off our income so we would have to crawl back to her for money. It was the scorched earth policy of a narcissist who realizes she has lost her supply. I felt a cold rage settle over me. It was different from the anger at the party. That was emotional. This was professional. She had attacked my career. She had attacked my reputation. Sarah, I said, keeping my voice level. I am currently involved in a domestic dispute with my mother-in-law regarding financial theft. This letter is retaliation. I have police reports filed regarding identity fraud. I have documentation of the theft. You have police reports? Sarah asked, looking relieved. I will have them by noon, I said. I stood up. Kylie, we still have to do the review. Sarah said. Do the review, I said, but put this in the file. I am not the liability. The woman who wrote this is... I walked out of the office and called Nate. Did you get called into HR? I asked the second he answered. Yeah, Nate sounded breathless. They showed me a letter. It says I am a gambling addict. Kai. She is trying to get us fired. She crossed the line. Nate, I said. The party was family business. This is war. What do we do? Nate asked. Do we call her? Do we beg her to stop? No, I said. We don't beg. We file. File what? Everything, I said. Restraining order, civil suit for the stolen funds, defamation suit for the letters, and I am sending the bank fraud evidence to the district attorney. The DA? Nate sounded terrified. Kai, that's prison time. She tried to take our jobs. Nate, she tried to take the food out of your daughter's mouth because you told her to leave a party. She isn't a mother anymore. She is a threat. There was a long silence on the line. I waited. I waited to see if the old Nate would surface, the one who wanted to keep the peace, the one who would say, Mom means well. Do it, Nate said. His voice was hard, cold. Call the lawyer. Burn it down. I hung up the phone. I looked out the window at the Charlotte skyline. Marjorie Caldwell thought she could write a list of reasons to destroy me. She thought reason number 23 was her trump card. She was about to learn that in my line of work. We don't just identify risks, we eliminate them. 3 weeks after the baby shower from hell, my phone buzzed with a notification from our new bank. It was a deposit alert. $9,800 had been wired into the account. There was no note attached. There was no apology in the memo line. Just the money, appearing as silently as it had vanished. It was Marjorie's way of trying to balance the ledger without admitting she had cooked the books. She thought the money was the problem. She didn't understand that the theft was just the symptom. The entitlement was the disease. The money was followed by an email. It wasn't an apology. It was a manifesto of martyrdom sent to Nate. Copied to me, Bryn, and Aunt Sylvia. Marjorie wrote that she was graciously returning the funds, despite the fact that she had only been stewarding them for our benefit. She claimed that I had manipulated the family narrative, that I was suffering from hormonal paranoia, and that one day, Nate would wake up and realize he had cut off the only person who truly loved him. Old Nate might have read that email and felt a pang of guilt. Old Nate might have said, "She is just hurting, Kai." But this was new Nate, the Nate who had seen his mother try to get him fired from his job. Nate didn't reply. He didn't call. He simply dragged the email into the trash folder and emptied it. "She doesn't get it," he said, closing his laptop. "She thinks if she rewrites history enough times, we will believe her version. I am done reading her fiction." 2 weeks later, my water broke. Labor is the great equalizer. It strips away all the pretenses and leaves you with only the essential truth of who shows up. When our daughter, Mila, arrived at 4 a.m, screaming her lungs out with the same ferocity as her mother, the hospital room was filled with peace. Bryn was there, holding my hand. Aunt Sylvia was there, smuggling in a bottle of sparkling cider, and Nate was there, crying as he held his daughter, looking at her like she was the only thing in the universe that mattered. Marjorie was not there. She tried to be. We found out later from the nurses that a woman fitting Marjorie's description had called the nurses' station 4 times, claiming to be the primary guardian and demanding to know the room number. When that didn't work, she actually showed up at the front desk with a bouquet of lilies, trying to talk her way past security by saying she was the grandmother and that there had been a clerical error on the visitor list. The security guard didn't buy it. He had a list, a very specific list that Nate had filled out in bold. Black ink. No visitors allowed. Marjorie Caldwell. When the nurse told Nate about it, his face didn't soften. He walked out to the hallway, called his mother, and left a voicemail that lasted 10 seconds. "You do not have a right to my daughter," Nate said. "You lost that right when you tried to destroy her mother. Respect my wife, or you will never see my child. This is not a negotiation." He hung up and came back to the bed. He kissed Mila's forehead. He kissed mine. And for the first time in our marriage, I didn't feel like I was sharing him. He was fully ours. The silence lasted for 6 months. It was a hard 6 months for Marjorie. We heard through the grapevine, mostly from Aunt Sylvia, who enjoyed the drama a little too much, that Marjorie was unraveling. The 47 reasons list had become infamous in their social circle. Apparently, one of the guests had leaked the story, and suddenly, the woman who prided herself on being the perfect matriarch was the gossip of the country club. She had handed us a weapon, and while we never used it in court, the threat of it hung over her head like a guillotine. We had consulted a lawyer. Just to be safe, I will never forget the look on his face when he read reason number 23. "She actually typed this?" the lawyer had asked, laughing in disbelief. "She typed out a confession of unauthorized banking access and intent to defraud?" "Mrs. Hughes, this isn't just a list. This is a plea bargain. If she ever tries to sue for grandparents' rights or claims defamation, you show this to a judge, and the case is dismissed in 5 minutes." That piece of paper, that ridiculous, hateful list, had become our shield. Then, the letter came. It wasn't typed. It was handwritten on plain stationery. It arrived on a Tuesday. 6 months after Mila was born. Nate opened it at the kitchen island while I was feeding the baby. He read it in silence, then handed it to me. "Dear Nathan and Kylie, the house is very quiet. I walked past your old room today, Nathan, and I realized I haven't heard your voice in half a year. I have spent a lot of time being angry. I have spent a lot of time telling myself I was the victim. But last week, I saw a photo of you holding Mila on Sylvia's phone. You looked happy. You looked free. I realized that I was so afraid of losing you to Kylie that I pushed you away myself. I controlled the money because I thought if you needed me, you wouldn't leave me. I wrote that list because I wanted to find flaws in her so I could feel superior. I was wrong. I am lonely, and I am tired of being right in an empty house. I am sorry." It was the first time she had ever apologized without a "but" attached to it. We didn't rush. We waited another week. Then, we agreed to meet. Neutral ground, the coffee shop on 4th Street, the same place Bryn had handed me the evidence of the theft. Marjorie was sitting at a table near the window. She looked older. The helmet of blonde hair was softer, less sprayed. She wasn't wearing a power suit. She was wearing a simple cardigan. When she saw us walk in, she stood up. She looked at Nate. Then she looked at me. Then, her eyes fell on the baby carrier in Nate's hand. She started to reach out, then stopped herself. She clasped her hands in front of her. "Thank you for coming," she said. Her voice was quiet. We sat down. Nate put the carrier on the table, but he didn't unzip the cover. Mila was sleeping. "We read your letter," Nate said. "I meant it," Marjorie said. She looked at me. And for the first time, her eyes weren't shark-like. They were just sad. Kylie, I owe you the biggest apology. I treated you like an intruder. I stole from you. I tried to ruin your reputation with those letters to your job. I was terrible to you because I was jealous. You didn't need me, and that terrified me. You hurt us, Marjorie, I said. You tried to break my marriage. I know, she nodded, tears welling in her eyes. I know I can't fix it overnight. I know I have no right to ask, but I would like to know my granddaughter. I would like to earn my way back. I looked at Nate. He gave me a small nod. It was my call. You can see her, I said. Marjorie let out a sob of relief. But, I raised a hand. There is a condition. Anything, she said. I need you to say it, I said. I need you to say it out loud. Right now, in front of Nate and Bryn. Say what? I want you to acknowledge exactly what you did, I said. No euphemisms, no mistakes. I want to hear you own it. Marjorie looked at me. She took a deep breath. She looked at her son, who was waiting. She looked at the sleeping baby. She realized that the price of admission to this family was no longer money or control. It was truth. I stole, Marjorie said, her voice shaking but clear. I controlled, and I was wrong. I stared at her for a long moment. I let the words hang in the air, replacing the memory of reason number 23. Okay, I said. I reached over and unzipped the carrier. Mila was awake, blinking her big eyes at the lights. I picked her up. She was warm and solid, and smelled like milk and innocence. I stood up and walked around the table. I placed my daughter in my mother-in-law's arms. Marjorie wept. She buried her face in the blanket, sobbing quietly, holding the baby like she was a lifeline. Nate watched them, his hand gripping mine under the table. He squeezed my fingers. It wasn't a perfect ending. We didn't go back to Sunday dinners every week. We kept our finances separate. We kept our boundaries high. Marjorie was on probation, and she knew it, but she was trying, and for now, that was enough. People always ask me if I regret reading that list out loud. They ask if it was too cruel, too public, and I always tell them the same thing. Marjorie gave me 47 reasons to leave her son, but she gave me one reason to stay. She forced us to fight for each other. She forced us to choose, and in the end, we chose us. Boundaries aren't revenge, they are protection. They are the fence you build around your garden so the flowers can actually grow. And looking at my family now, I would say we are blooming just fine. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening on your commute? At the gym? Or maybe while you are folding laundry? Drop a comment below and let me know. I love reading them. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more real-life dramas about justice served cold, please make sure you are subscribed to the Morgan Revenge Stories channel. Hit that like button. And if you really want to help us out, smash that hype button so this story can reach even more people. Until next time, keep your receipts and protect your peace.